I'll be talking about construction trespass. Some of the topics that I will cover include trespass into subsoil, trespass into the airspace, and I'll also be covering some of the damages that are awarded due to trespass, and also some of the legislation that relate to trespass in construction. As you guys are aware, it's inevitable if you have a piece of land that you will have neighbors adjacent to it. Now, unless you are fortunate enough to be on an island by yourself to develop your own construction activities without having to ask for permission from neighbors, most construction activities that take place on land which is adjacent to other properties, you have to obtain consent from these neighboring properties. If you choose to proceed with your construction activities without obtaining that consent, then in most cases, and what's most likely to happen is that the court would order an injunction. What is an injunction? An injunction would be an order for you to stop your construction activities. In most cases as well, apart from injunction is the first line of action that the court would order, but also the court would possibly order the award of damages. So you'd have to pay damages to whoever you encroached onto their property. Now, in this Di Napoli and New Beach Apartments case, the one that you see highlighted on the screen in front of you, a New South Wales case that took place in 2004, the anchors that were installed and that had encroached onto the property of the plaintiff, that was considered as trespass. And so the court had ordered an injunction, so the defendant had to stop construction works, and he also had to pay damages to the plaintiff. How are damages assessed by the courts? The damages are usually assessed by considering the amount that would have hypothetically been agreed to by both parties. So hypothetically speaking, if the two parties were to negotiate, how much would have they agreed on? And that would be the amount that would be awarded as damages. In the assessment of damages for trespass, as I said in the previous slide, it's usually based on the hypothetical agreement. And that hypothetical agreement, what makes up that hypothetical agreement is the profit that would have been gained by the trespasser in using the neighbor's land. That's what the court usually assesses. Now, this is for general damages. In some cases, however, the court would order for nominal damages to be paid rather than general damages. Now, remember, nominal damages are less than general damages. And a case that highlights this is the Sinclair and Gavigan case. And in this case, there was a particular there was so one of the parties was developing a property, and through their construction activities, they figured out that it would have been easier to access the land through someone else's property, the person that was suing them. And so the plaintiff over here had a property, did not give permission for the defendant to access their property, and the defendant was utilizing the plaintiff's property in order to deliver material to their construction site. Now, the court ordered for nominal damages to be paid by the defendant to the plaintiff. In this case, it was nominal because there was an alternative route that the defendant could have utilized, but the defendant just utilized that shorter route because it was more convenient for them. So the court found that there was no real commercial benefit that was obtained by the defendant utilizing the plaintiff's land to access their construction site beyond convenience. So it's just a matter of convenience, and that's what devalued the actual value of the trespass. Because of the presence of that alternative route, and because that there was no real commercial benefit, the damages were not based on profit, but were based on a nominal value that the court had ordered. When trespass occurs in airspace, and these cases usually involve tower cranes encroaching onto someone else's property without their permission, how would the court assess the situation? It depends on this important question. That first point, does this action interfere with the ordinary use of the land which the landowner or the occupier may see fit to undertake? So that's a necessary question that the court has to ask about the certain action that could constitute trespass. If it does interfere, then the action would be considered as trespass. If it doesn't, it wouldn't be considered as trespass. Now, in the LPJ Investments and Howard case, There was scaffolding that projected 1.5 meters into the airspace of a neighboring property. That was found to be trespass, to constitute trespass. In coming up with this decision, the court said that the plaintiff, in this instance, would have been obstructed from carrying out high-rise building construction activities if they desired to do that in the future. So that's another element that the court would try to assess, is how would certain actions impact future actions that a plaintiff would have in mind, and if these are found to be impacted, then a court would deem that particular action as constituting trespass. Again, this final point, that the plaintiff would have been obstructed from carrying out future activities due to that particular action that was found to be trespass. This was highlighted again in the Bendel and Mervac case. This case was really important again because apart from this finding, there was another finding, the fact that a protective mesh screen that was protruding into the plaintiff's airspace was found to constitute trespass, continuing trespass. So similar to the scaffolding case discussed above. In the Lang, Parade and Peluso case, Crane had encroached onto Peluso's land. Now, the two parties had tried to negotiate, and Peluso was offered $35,000, but they rejected that, and they sued in trespass. And they said that they wanted a bigger amount, but the court dropped that to $20,000. So it's not, the value that the innocent party would deem to be fit for themselves. That's not the value that the court would necessarily order. So the court has its own assessment. It can either award general damages based on profit that it would deem to have been lost by that innocent party, or it can just order nominal damages as we had described in the previous slide. The damages that are awarded to compensate the owner of an airspace for any loss or disadvantage that may be suffered due to trespass, that's usually, the method of assessing the amount. It's based on compensating the owner of the airspace for any loss or disadvantage that could have been suffered due to the action of trespass that took place. Again, in this case that I was describing in the previous slide, the Bendel and Mervac case, a third important finding was that weather veining was not considered as trespass. What is weather veining? Weather veining is when your crane is left unloaded and hence it moves freely with the wind. So that, sort of movement that takes place in this particular case, the Bendel and Mervac case, that tower crane was sort of moving due to the wind. It was unloaded, and because of that movement, it was encroaching onto someone else's property. Now, the court found that this action, the weather veining action, was not considered as trespass. All right, so we've covered trespass to the airspace. Now we're moving on to trespass to the subsoil. Trespass to the subsoil usually occurs because someone wants to mine under someone else's property. Okay, and that would be considered as trespass. This was highlighted in the Bully Call and Osborne case. In Australian case, so where one party was mining beneath someone else's property, and that action was considered to be trespass by the court. Now, finally, talking about legislation, New South Wales legislation that targets trespass in the construction industry. An important act is the Access to Neighbouring Land Act. In the year 2000, this was enforced. It allows the court to issue a neighbouring land access. So this gives, or it grants courts the ability to issue a neighbouring land access in situations where the parties fail to arrive to an agreement. Now, Section 11, Part 2A, you have to demonstrate that there was reasonable effort that was exerted into negotiating with the neighbor before you proceed to court in order to gain that neighboring land access. Okay, so it has to be demonstrated that there was reasonable negotiation that took place and that these negotiations failed. some of the elements that the court would assess before issuing that neighboring land access is whether it will be hard for the neighbor to sort of in a situation when such an access is granted, would it cause hardship for that neighbor? And also whether the works need to be whether the works that need to be uh, granted neighboring land access, whether they are substantially more expensive to carry out without the order. So if they are substantially more expensive to carry out, then that would act as an incentive for the court to actually issue an order, and that's according to Section 15 of the Act. In terms of compensation, so compensation to neighboring landowner is in the form of a payment for the financial loss or the damage that they um, experience. And in terms of damages, it's the damage to the personal property itself. And that's according to Section 26 of the Act. In most cases, when the neighboring access is granted by the court, it's usually granted with conditions attached to it. Some of the conditions include that the person that's gaining the right to access, they have to have insurance to cover certain risks. And it's just to protect both parties in this case.